the intern minister down in Long Beach, so it's kind of nice to be back. Before I begin my sermon, I want to actually just extend a note of gratitude to your minister, Reverend Wiltshire, to your new Director of Religious Education, Reverend Tomlinson, to Beth, to Sarah, to David, your sexton, and of course to Linda. Collaborating with everyone has been a pleasant reminder that while I may prepare my sermon alone, worship and indeed ministry is a collective act. At the end of today's sermon, I'm going to invite you to turn to your neighbor and share a few words with them that I offer you. Think of it as kind of a responsive reading to close out the sermon. Now imagine this is something you probably don't do very often in your congregation. And so figured we might want to practice it at the beginning. So I'd like to just invite you now to turn to your neighbor and say, "Neighbor, it is good to be here this morning." Thank you for humoring the guest minister. Now, just to reiterate, this is not an opportunity for coffee hour in the middle of the sermon. It's really, kind of a responsive reading. So just know that when we get to it, you'll have a few moments, and then you get to coffee hour. You get to have your exciting conversation. So having said that, let's get started with the sermon proper. It revolves around a simple assertion. Unitarian Universalist communities can and do play a vital role in birthing a better world and unleashing the full human potential. To get us started in consideration of this claim, I want to ask you a simple question. Do you believe in magic? Now, I do. And by magic, I mean nothing more than the act of creating something out of nothing. Some years ago, my friend Richard taught me about it. Now, Richard is a distinguished medical doctor and an HIV researcher. Not exactly the sort of person who you usually think of as a proponent of magic. But nonetheless, he explained it to me this way. Colin, magic is imagining something that does not exist and then bringing that thing into being. It's really simple. Imagine that I'm hungry and that I want a sandwich. I do not have one, so I'm going to make one. I get a couple of pieces of nice rye bread, a bit of sharp cheese, some oily tuna, a few capers, a little mayonnaise, and pretty soon I have a sandwich. I've used my imagination to create something that did not exist before in the world, a delicious sandwich. Richard's sandwich is a simple illustration of a profound act, profound force in the world, the human imagination. The ability to imagine something and then bring that something into being is one of the greatest of human talents. It's a magical act. Magic is something we nurture in our Unitarian Universalist congregations. I actually like to think of church that way, as a place where we make magic happen. In our liberal religious communities, we collectively imagine things or social arrangements that don't exist, and then bring those things or social arrangements into being. Now, this imaginative act is not the only, bringing something into being is not the only kind of magic we can find in our congregations. There's another kind of magic, the magic of becoming deeply attuned to the wonder of the world around us. The world is a pretty amazing place. The space between the jagged notes of jazz, starfish clutched rocks beaten by the sea, the tactile sensation of hand upon hand that we call fellowship, the carpeted infinity of twinkles that form the dark sky, the strange moments when history breaks and the impossible suddenly becomes what is, the regular rich rhythm of kitchen chores, sharp knife upon crisp vegetable. There is such deep wonder and awe to be encountered on this muddy blue ball of a planet we call Earth. One of the earliest ways I learned about this kind of magic was through my favorite children's author, Daniel Pinkwater. Have any of you heard of him? Yes, I see some hands, that's nice. He used to be a regular commentator on NPR, right? So he's somewhat well known. And I have been reading a lot of Pinkwater lately. You see, I have a 10-year-old son, and one of the great things about being a parent is that you get to share your favorite children's books with your children. And so in the last couple of years, I've discovered that my son really loves Pinkwater, and we've read probably about a dozen of his books together. And they have really great titles like The Snark-Out Boys and the Avocado of Death, Alan Mendelsohn, The Boy from Mars, or Yab Gorgle, The Mystery Monster of Lake Ontario. Reading these books as an adult, I've realized that they have a common theme. The world is filled with magic. The trick is finding it. And finding it doesn't turn out to be all that difficult. Just a matter of perceiving things around you a little bit differently. When you do, you start to notice amazing things that you've not noticed before. Take The Snark-Out Boys and the Avocado of Death. It tells the story of three friends who snark out, that is, sneak out of the house late at night to go see the movies. Now, they don't go to just any movie theater. They go to the Snark Theater. It's a 24-hour theater that shows all kinds of films. Everything from the latest blockbusters to obscure foreign and independent films such as Vampires in a Deserted Seaside Hotel at the End of August and Invasion of the Bagaloids. That last one is about rock-hard, intelligent bagels from outer space who attack the Earth. Now, the Snark is not just a movie theater, it's a way of life. Going there allows the kids to enter into a world that they would have never encountered otherwise. They learn the finer points of soapboxing, that's speaking on a street corner, amid a medley of impassioned hipsters, political activists, and the militantly religious. They meet Captain Shep Nesterman, a street artist with an elaborate routine that features Dharmawati, the dancing chicken. The chicken actually lives under Nesterman's hat when the two are not performing. The kids even get to collaborate with the world's greatest detective on a case. Now, none of this is their own creation. The magical world that the three friends find already existed. They just had to learn where to discover it. They just had to open themselves to the wonder that surrounded them, and then there it was. Most people and places in the novel, incidentally, are fictionalized versions of people and places that existed in 1950 Chicago. The Snark Theater was based on the Julian Theater, a small theater on the north side, noted for its screenings of obscure Scandinavian language films. There actually was a famous street artist in Chicago with performing chicken. Chicken Charlie liked to travel around the city's buses with a white rooster perched upon his fedora. The world is filled with wonder. We imagine new social combinations of things that never existed before and then bring those into being. And Unitarian Universalist congregations are places where both kinds of magic can happen. The readings I chose for this morning speak to the different kinds of magic we can create and encounter. There are actually few more famous passages in all of American letters than Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream. It contains a bold vision that this country's history of white supremacy can be overcome. The speech is a profoundly imaginative act, one that comes as close to the definition of magic that we have been using as I can envision. King wanted to dream into existence a racially and economically peace-filled world. His words express the dreams of millions who similarly longed for a country that lived out the true meaning of its creed. The civil rights movement of which King was a part did much to make the dream he expressed a reality. Now, exactly how that beautiful movement accomplished what it did, and precisely what it accomplished and what has left to be accomplished still in the future, lies beyond the scope of my sermon. The important point is this. Collectively, civil rights workers imagined that the world could be different, and it became so. Magic. Now, before we get to Nikki Giovanni, let me say this. Imagining that the world can be different is an acknowledgement that it has changed over time. The social structures, the economic institutions, Even the very categories that we use to define ourselves and each other have been imagined into being. And we can imagine new ways of being together. Now take race, that seemingly intractable, ever-present, ever-contested reality that King dreamed could be overcome when the sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners sit down together at the table of brotherhood. What if I were to tell you that race was something that was imagined into being? That it did not exist as a natural category in the world, but was something we humans created? If we ask any honest scientist, they will tell us that race has no genetic basis in reality. If we ask any honest historian, they will tell us that race is a social construction. And it's actually even possible to pinpoint the precise moments when race, as we think of it, came into being. The idea that black people and white people are somehow different races begins on August 8th, 1444. That was the day that Prince Henry of Portugal arrived at the port of Lagos in Portugal with a human cargo of 235 African slaves. Until that moment, humans with black flesh had not been described by European thinkers as inherently different than or inferior to humans with paler color flesh. The arrival of a large group of African slaves to the European continent marks the beginning of the European ideas of racial difference. And it's followed by other moments that we can identify. There's 1662, when the Virginia legislature passed a law that race was a legal category that someone inherits from their mother. There's 1787, when the United States Constitution was adopted with its infamous 3/5 clause. There's 1857, when the Dred Scott case, the Supreme Court ruled that no black person could be a citizen. All of these acts created race. They happened long before the oldest amongst us was born, and that means it can be easy for us to forget that race is a human creation. And yet King and others in the civil rights movement form part of a tradition that has fought to reimagine this human construct. Like the abolitionists before them and Black Lives Matter today, they were able to envision a day when the racial barriers that had been constructed could be deconstructed. They were able to envision a day when every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, and the rough places shall be made plain. Then I awoke and dreamed and dug that if I dreamed natural dreams of being a natural woman doing what she does when she's natural, I would have a revolution. The emphasis of Nikki Giovanni's revolutionary dreams is somewhat different than King's I Have a Dream. It speaks to that second kind of magic, the magic of becoming aware of what already is. The revolution which Giovanni dreams of is a revolution in which she is freely able to be who she is, a natural woman, doing what a woman does when she's natural. Giovanni has been called the poet of the Black Revolution. The revolution which she imagines includes the dream of liberation from white supremacy. But it also includes cultivating awareness and appreciation for the richness of what is, the wonder that surrounds us. A line in one of her most famous poems runs, "Black love is black wealth." It's offered in defiance of the racists who want to cast black life in the black community she grew up in as anything other than beautiful. It, like revolutionary dreams, is a call to remember that there is profound beauty to be found in who we are already, discovering what is around us. Magic. Dreaming a new world into being, opening ourselves to the wonder that surrounds us. There is a way in which we tap into both of these kinds of magic by changing ourselves. It's a bit like my friend Richard's sandwich. If you want a sandwich, you have to make it. If you want to live in a different world, you have to start engaging in the world differently. One of the best places to do that is in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. It's not very long ago that same-sex marriage was illegal. The idea of marriage equality seemed a fanciful dream. I'm just old enough to remember when it seemed that almost every member of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer communities in my hometown was in the closet. Or in the closet at least almost everywhere except in our Unitarian Universalist congregation. In my congregation growing up, we had a diversity of sexual orientations and gender identities. Through religious education and in my youth group, I was taught that honoring this diversity made our community a freer and more loving place, one in which we could bring the fullness of who we were in a way that was not possible in other communities. The same was true of the congregation I used to serve back in Cleveland. Now, Cleveland, Ohio is a somewhat culturally conservative place, and we were the only congregation in our neighborhood that performed same-sex unions. Same-sex marriage was then illegal in Ohio, but we believed in marriage equality. We believed in celebrating a diversity of sexual orientations and gender identities. I remember one same-sex union we did in particular. It's for a couple who lived in the neighborhood. The two women did not attend the congregation, never saw them on Sunday morning, but one day they came up to the church and knocked on our front door. They were very much in love. They wanted to know if we could do a service to bless their union, to honor their love. Now, they came from very conservative families. They told people that they lived together as roommates, but they were able to share their beautiful truth with us. And so we organized a service in the sanctuary where they could commit to each other and sanctify their bond. The only people who came to the service were members of the congregation. And afterwards, the women told us how deeply blessed they felt by us. And we were just one of hundreds of congregations, Unitarian Universalist congregations across the United States that did similar things, performed same-sex unions when same-sex marriage was illegal. But here is the secret. In our congregations, we lived as if same-sex marriage was already legal. We lived as if it was perfectly normal for there to be families with two dads or two moms. We did this just as we lived as if it was perfectly normal for there to be families with single parents or two heterosexual parents. And because we did this, we helped to create a world in which it was possible to celebrate many kinds of families and many kinds of partnerships. I even understand that your congregation held free weddings here as soon as same-sex marriage was legal and that Beth and her wife Jan were some of the first people in the first people in the county, the first people in the county to be married after the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage. And this is how social change happens. A group of people imagine that the world can be different. And then they act as if the world is different. That is, they open themselves up to the full, wonderful existence of human reality. And then the world changes. It's how we make our dreams tangible. It is magic, and it is something we can do in our congregations. This theology actually forms the collective foundation of Unitarian Universalism. Our tradition has deep resonances with early Christianity. There were Unitarian and Universalist Christians long before Trinitarianism became the dominant tradition within Christianity. The primary images that these early Christians embraced in their chapels and sanctuaries was not a crucified Jesus. It was paradise. Contemporary Unitarian Universalist theologian Rebecca Parker has observed, in the early church, paradise was this world, permeated and blessed by the Spirit of God. Describing ancient churches, she writes, images of it captured the craggy, scruffy, pastoral landscape, the orchard, the clear night skies. Sparkling mosaics in vivid colors mirrored the world's luminosity. Parker believes that the purpose of the early church was to create paradise here on our sun-blessed orb. And she thinks that our Unitarian Universalist congregations are at their best when our members embrace the beauty of our daily lives while challenging the worldly powers and principalities. That is, she thinks that the purpose of our religious communities is to push us to create paradise here on earth while opening ourselves to the marvels of the universe that surround us. Heaven can be found in this world, wherever love prevails and the gifts of life are stewarded with reverence and respect, she tells us. The world is filled with an infinity of wonders. We can dream new things, new forms of social arrangements into being. We can do this together in our Unitarian Universalist congregations. What do you discover when you let yourself dream? How would you imagine the world to be different? When you open yourself up to wonder, what do you find already surrounds you? What kind of magic would you make happen? Now, rather than answering my questions myself, here comes your part, the responsive reading. I'd like to invite you to turn to your neighbor and share with them 3 sentences. First sentence, we can imagine a better world. Try it.
We can imagine a better world.
We can bring that world into being.
We can bring that world into being.
We can make magic together.
We can make magic together.
We can imagine a better world. We can bring that world into being. We can make magic together. Amen, and blessed be.